Good afternoon, everybody. It's lunchtime. And you know what that means? It means that today we're going to talk a little bit about realignment. And for those of you who want to comment, plenty of opportunity to do it. We had a wonderful group yesterday. Hope that we will have just as good a group today. And, just a little housekeeping situation here. And that is that you should be watching and keep an eye out for Sean and the gang. They're doing a hell of a job bringing us World Cup updates and inside information and all the things that you really want. If you're a soccer fan or if you're just want to know what's going on in the World Cup, want to promote what Sean and the gang are doing. And we had, of course, the show this morning, which was awesome. We have some guys from France, from Italy, from Germany, from all around the world who are joining us every day. So keep a lookout for that, and I think that you're going to enjoy it. And just keep out a lookout for the channel, and we're just building the channel up a bit and having some fun doing it. And we couldn't do it without you guys. We could not absolutely do it without you guys. You are the best, and we very much enjoy having you. So, conference realignment. We talked about this yesterday. Who goes where, if anywhere, right? Who's got the money to spend? Where's the money coming from? Are we going to see more partnerships, right? Because I do believe that's going to be what's going to happen. How bad has the cord cutting gotten? How important is streaming to the future of sports in general, not just for college sports? What's the big NFL deal and Major League Baseball deal? How are they going to affect how much money can be spent? We don't have an unlimited amount of money. That's just the way it goes. I wish it was different, but that's just not the case. The networks, we used to print money because of cable distribution. That is trending in the wrong direction for them. So how do we get to a point where everybody gets what they want? Let's start with the idea of the Super League, right? Where we've even heard things about the possibility of maybe just jettisoning, like the Big Ten getting rid of the dead weight, or the SEC getting rid of the dead weight. Well, honestly, guys, that can't happen. Okay, and I'll tell you why. When you sign the grant of rights, you're basically all in this together. The only way out of, for instance, the SEC grant of rights, we use that as an example, is if you do something that violates the agreements that you were involved in, right? So you'd have to do something very egregious. It would have to be something that basically would get the entire conference in trouble. You can't just get rid of people because they're not playing well. For instance, that's just not the way it happens. The reason that conferences go together and come together is because you're of like mind and you want to see the same things happen. So these are universities that not just get together and play sports, but they do get together and work on projects to make the universities better as a whole, both academically as well as promotion and grant money and a number of different things that out there that just transcend, frankly, the the football field or the basketball court. It's just beyond sports. It's how things move in a new and different world, and I think that that's something that we all need to embrace and understand, right? It's why some conferences fit with each other while others don't. If I had to put a look at it, you would say that perhaps the ACC conference and the Big Ten match up well because of the academics and because of the kind of ethos that they have, right? The way that they look at sports. Meanwhile, the Big 12 and the SEC probably are closer. Now, I've had the pleasure of doing Big 10, SEC um, games for a number of years, getting to go to all of the different campuses, getting to experience what life is like on those campuses. And that's why I think people misunderstand things, right? You A lot of people feel that the Big 12 have chips on their shoulder, right? Well, honestly, if you go to a game in Starkville, Mississippi, right, and then you go to a game in Lawrence, Kansas, there's really not much difference. You've got great tailgating people. You've got people who are passionate about their teams, their college towns. At Morgantown, West Virginia, all right, outstanding ambiance for game day. You've got the tailgaters that are there 5, 6 a.m. in the morning. For a noon game, we would get there around between 5 and 6 in the morning, and you could smell the people making breakfast. You could smell the bacon. You could hear people getting ready for the game and talking about the game, and even radios on. In some cases, more recently, because of the streaming situation, you would see people having big screen TVs, which they would pull out of the back of their SUVs, and everybody be sitting there watching game day on ESPN. As they got ready to enter the stadium for the telecast, for the game. So it's college football is a different vibe than the National Football League. I mean, it's totally different. It's one of the reasons I chose to do college as opposed to pro, because you don't get that in an NFL stadium. You don't get that. I mean, sure, there's tailgating, there's pride. I mean, you go to a Steelers game in Pittsburgh, a Packers game in Green Bay, a Bears game in Chicago. There is definitely a vibe there. There's definitely feeling, but it's not. It doesn't start on Saturday night. It begins early on Sunday morning. In the case of college football, it begins Friday night. Some cases it begins Thursday night, and the lead up to that game is so very important to everyone that is involved in watching it. Right? You've got the families coming from all over the country, to get together to share in the fact that, hey, we went to that university. We're proud of what we're doing. People wearing jerseys, people wearing hats, people painting their faces. I mean, it's that kind of vibe. It's not necessarily that kind of vibe in some other conferences. As I said, I would have likened the Big 12 and the SEC to be very close together in that feel. It's a very, very communal thing. The ACC and the Big 10, it's a little different. Okay, not much, but a little bit. And that is, these schools have been around for a very, very long time. And so the tradition that they have of how they, treat a game day is a little different than, as I said, the SEC or the Big 12. The ACC, it doesn't have the football history that the other conferences do. Not to mean that they don't take it seriously. FSU certainly does. Clemson certainly does. You can go around the ACC and find really good, really good fan bases enjoying football. Virginia Tech's another place I can talk about. But it's all about game day and building up to that. So what does that mean with regard to how people tend to want to watch their games, and who exactly makes good partners? Well, we've everybody's touched on Florida State and Clemson and University of North Carolina, and University of Miami, and some other outstanding universities that are in the ACC. They've also reached out and looked at and talked about, Arizona State from the Big 12, Utah from the Big 12, Kansas from the Big 12. Teams that feel maybe that they're just a little bit out of place. They had an opportunity to go to the Big 12 when the Pac disintegrated, and it's not that they don't like being there. It's just that they don't feel that that the vibe is different. Um, you go to a football game, and Kenny Dillingham's done a wonderful job at Arizona State of putting together an outstanding team. You go to Utah and a beautiful stadium up there. You've got, it's a they're still stuck in the Pac-12 mindset, and that is that they take the game seriously, of course, but they just don't have anything in common yet. And I say yet because there's still plenty of time to get to that point. But they just don't seem to have this anything in common with some of the others teams in there. And I think that's when I say that the vibe is there. Does that mean that I disrespect schools in any of these conferences? Absolutely not. These are all fine universities, every one of them. You can get a degree from any of those and be proud of it. And there certainly are people. You don't even have to get a degree from the universities. There's a lot of people who, what we like to call here in the East, subway, alumni. The subway alumni is basically the people in New York who are Notre Dame fans who didn't graduate from Notre Dame, but they followed them ever since they were little kids. And I think that's one of the things that we think and enjoy and have great fun with is the understanding that each and every university is unique in how they treat their sports, their academics, and their fan base. And you can't just lump everybody together and say, well, this is what it is and what it isn't. And we've talked about everything from carriage fees for the networks, meaning the ACC network, the Big Ten network, the Southeastern Conference network, and what does that mean, and how does it drive money to the universities and to the conferences, and where are we going with this? What's streaming going to be like? What's it going to be like in 2030 when new contracts are starting to move forward? We talked about really the one thing that there's two things actually we need to keep an eye on. I don't think that the Congressional Save College Sports Act, that bill is going to be changed and changed and changed again if it ever gets out of the Senate and goes to the House. But what I think it does is the bill itself doesn't necessarily have to be passed to have an impact on how things are seen. So let's take a look for a moment at the fact, as I said before, that the NFL contract is going to be somewhere in the area of between $150 billion and $200 billion. To give you an idea, Adam Silver and the NBA has a $76 billion contract that they just signed. Major League Baseball is on the clock right now for their new deal. We've seen that Fox, Lachlan Murdoch, who's the son of Rupert Murdoch, who runs Fox, has said, we need to keep the NFL at all costs, absolutely at all costs, meaning, and he said it, this is not me, you can look it up, without any problem at a shareholders meeting in February that if they have to shed some sports from their sports portfolio to keep the NFL, they will. NBC has the number one show on television for 17 weeks out of the season, I guess 18 weeks out of the season, um, in Sunday Night Football. They're not giving that up. That means they're going to have to pay, pretty heavy. Certainly, ABC, ESPN cannot. They're actually part of the NFL now. So, that deal, which of course they struck, was a big deal, and so it means that forever, the NFL and ESPN, ABC are going to be together, right? So there's that. CBS, we know, doesn't want to lose that, so CBS is not going to back down. CBS now has, control of TNT, TBS, and that whole situation when Skydance got involved with Warner and Discovery to take over that. So there's a lot of mouths to feed and a lot of things here. Okay. What happens to all of these? You can't just look at it from a college standpoint. Okay. You have to look at it from each sport and where are they going to go. NBC a while ago, and they've done it twice now. They got rid of some of their cable networks. The first wave went out. MSNBC, the Golf Channel, they definitely were taken off the NBC roll and rolled out in a totally separate entity, where they are going to now be, standalone products. So that, and USA Network, by the way, is one of those standalone products. So you've got that little bin out there. Okay, you've got the bin that, that we just talked about. CBS with Paramount Plus, HBO Max are now under the same roof. So you've got that consolidation. You've got consolidation with ABC, ESPN, being there together. Then you've got Fox, and Fox has purchased Roku, and they are going to hopefully, in their case, be the aggregator of these content. Okay, so we're gonna have some fun there. The deal, and it's not a tough deal, is to sit down and look at all this, right? Where's the golf gonna go? CBS, of course, has golf, as does NBC. They're the main, channels for golf. The golf channels out there could be purchased. Okay, maybe that's where we go with that. Maybe that streams to there. You've got racing, which is NASCAR, IndyCar, F1. Apple took on F1 this year and got it away from ESPN. So if you want to watch that, if you want to watch F1 racing, you have to watch it streaming it on Apple. NASCAR will be looking for their deal. IndyCar is kind of like a little further down on the totem pole, so they really don't get to grow from that standpoint. So, where's that? We know what the NBA is tied up, so that's nothing. NHL is in a new situation. ESPN and TNT enjoyed, what they got out of that deal with the NHL, but now the NHL is out. So we got Major League Baseball, National Hockey League, and NFL all competing for money. That's before we get to the 2030 deal with college sports. So you can't just look at college sports as one thing, right? You can't. I mean, we are fans, so we do look at it and say, "Oh well, it's worth this, it's worth that." It's worth what the market will bear is what it's worth, and it is what we're going to see here is perhaps smaller packages, and I mean by that CBS will be in on the Big Ten. And part of it will be them pushing some of that content over onto Paramount Plus. Same is going to be the case, and it happened last year with NBC. NBC, of course, has Notre Dame and the Big Ten, so they have two people that they have to serve. So they've got the primetime show, and so they're going to have to decide, okay, we're going to put content on both channels. Some days they ran Notre Dame on streaming on Peacock, and then some days they ran it on in their 7:30 time slot. So it just depends on what goes on in that regard. But streaming is going to be a major part of this, and it's ironic that the folks at the Pac-12 ran away from it when, in essence, they could have been on the cutting edge of it. And we've got these networks that have generated money through carriage fees, and that's of course ratcheting down as more and more people are getting away from it. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is we need to look at the entire product globally. What globally are we watching, right? What sports? The Premier League, we're now in the middle of World Cup, right? The Premier League is a big deal for NBC. The Champions League, the UEFA Champions League, is a big deal for Paramount Plus. These are things that drive subscriptions, and we need to look at it that way. Okay, subscriptions are based in large part on niche programming, and what I mean by that is if I'm a soccer fan and I know I can get all of the Premier League on Paramount on NBC, then I'm going to subscribe to Peacock because that's where I'm going to find my soccer. ESPN, of course, has other leagues, the Bundesliga and the Serie A and others. There's a less. There's still interest in those leagues, but there's less interest in that and what NBC has with the Premiership and what CBS has on Paramount Plus with Champions League. So there's that. There's golf, as I said before. There's tennis. There's the 3 auto racing properties we spoke about. You can't just, it's going to have to be a way right now to sit here and decide, all right, what is it we want and where are we going to put our money? And I think that, excuse me, what does that mean for the Big Ten and the SEC are going to get paid? How much more they're going to get paid rests largely on the value that they feel that they bring to the marketplace. So does that mean that adding teams will help them? The answer to the question is yes. I'm not denying it. What I am saying is they don't have to. They don't have to add anything, and they'll still get the top money because they are the Big Ten and they're SEC. The key is, do they pry away teams from other conferences to make money, and where are those teams that make money for them? Is it FSU? Is it Clemson? Is it University of North Carolina? Is it Miami? Who of those 4, and I'm just saying those 4, there's others out there. As I said, if they wanted to go west and they felt that was an important thing for them to do, then certainly Arizona State becomes a player in that deal. Why? Because Arizona is, you've got Phoenix, which is a major market. You've got very strong streaming numbers out there, and you also have a tremendous fan base of Big Ten people who have gone, from the Midwest and have relocated in the Phoenix area. The wild card is kind of Utah. Utah has become a very hot sports state. You look at what, obviously the Jazz, were there and have for years done well. The other sleeping giants out there, of course, the hockey team, the Mammoth, they did very well this year. The soccer team is doing very well. Obviously, the University of Utah has had solid attendance for years out there now, and so they can look at that, the Big Ten, and can look at it and say, well, maybe, maybe. I don't think they're going west. Honestly, I think that right now, if I had to zero in on who they're looking for, it might be Florida State. They're going to get a Florida team. All right, we know that. We know that there's a. No, I shouldn't say we know it. Let me put it this. Let me rephrase that. We assume with, an educated guess that they're going to go there. All right. Now, what are they going to do when they get there? We'll have to see. But they're kicking the tires on that, all of these. They probably have a list of maybe 8 schools. And what does these schools bring as potential members? And so we'll see where that goes. Why does University of North Carolina fit both? And they seem to be, if there's a pecking order, right, of what schools do we want, it seems like probably, and again, this comes from conversations with people I've had in both leagues. Not that they're saying to me, Jim, we're definitely running out there and grabbing, team A, team B, team, whatever. They're saying that here's the teams that, we feel might be good members. And North Carolina comes up on both sides of the coin regularly. Now, North Carolina is a growth area. There is, strong market streaming, and in the research triangle down there in Raleigh-Durham, there's money in the Charlotte area. So Carolina is academically fits perfectly into the Big Ten, and it would put a tent pole in the South, which, right now they don't particularly have. As I said before, they'll take one of the 2 Florida schools. They won't take them both. I wouldn't worry if I'm a Florida State fan about whether or not, the AAU thing is a problem. Nebraska is in the conference, and they had an AAU distinction, but it was revoked years back. Not for anything they did research-wise, or they didn't violate anything. What they did is they split the medical school away from Norman, and so that there wasn't on campus anymore, or wasn't basically close enough to the university. So it's it's apples and oranges. There's no reason to not. Let me just put it this way: the University of Nebraska didn't do anything egregious to violate any rules. They just lost it because of location and research situations. That's not a problem. So so do I think that if FSU doesn't get, which they could, by the way, an AAU distinction between now and 2030, that they wouldn't be invited to the dance? No, I don't think that at all. I think that FSU still remains a prime possible landing spot in the Big Ten. But they're not taking 2 schools from the state of Florida. That makes no sense. Take one of the 2. Miami, All right, let's go back. Let's go down to Miami. Sam Jankovic in what was it, 1980s? Sam Jankovic said, he was the athletic director there, that they wanted to create Miami to be the Stanford of the South. Now, what does that mean? Well, in conversations with Sam, his point was, we want to be known for athletics and academics. We want smart kids to come here, and we want great student athletes. Well, into the 80s, when the U was the U, right? First under Howard Schnellenberger, who was the pipe smoking, guy um, with the perfectly done suit and tie, and so he looked more like a professor than a football coach. But boy, did Howard do an amazing job, because had Howard not done that, had Howard Schnellenberger not invigorated the University of Miami, people forget the University of Miami quit NCAA basketball in 1968. Rick Barry, who went on to become, basketball Hall of Famer, um, was part of the almost. I think it was he might have been in the last class of basketball. So they got rid of it. They were thinking at Miami of downgrading the football program in the late 70s, early 80s, if they didn't, begin to show some progress. So Schnellenberger came in. Now, he had been working on the staff of Don Shula at the Miami Dolphins. And he realized that, the problem was they're just not recruiting the state of Florida well. And so that was his mission number one. Howard turned the program around and should be getting a lot of credit for making that a phenomenal university, and from a standpoint of football. And he did a really good job of bringing that together. Okay. So Howard does that, and he, you know, decides, because in '84 the USFL is around. He thinks he wants a head coaching job in the pros, because he came from the Dolphins, went to the to University of Miami, and got them a national championship. So he's like, okay, my resume is pretty good here. I worked for the Dolphins, took the University of Miami to high heights. So in '84, he gets named to coach the Miami franchise of the USFL, which never ever came to fruition. They never played a game. They never did anything. So there was Howard. He was gone, and they bring in Jimmy Johnson. Now, for those of you who don't know Jimmy's background, Jimmy, of course, played at Arkansas, and he was a guy who always kind of had a chip on his shoulder. He felt like, he should have been, when Frank Broyles left Arkansas, that he should be the heir apparent there. And a lot of people thought he should be. And, he didn't get offered that job. So he did get offered the job at the University of Miami, and he took it. Being around Jimmy was a treat, because, Jimmy had that kind of like us against the world mentality, right? He had no problem beating you, if he could, by 60 points. That was Jimmy Johnson. Jimmy Johnson's, and his team reflected it, right? You look at the Miami teams of that era, the Jimmy Johnson era. My God, they just didn't beat people; they pummeled people, and that's what I think was we've all seen the U, and both ESPN 30 for 30 documentaries on the U. The U um, was Jimmy's taking his chip on his shoulder and kind of pummeling everybody with it. And they had the swagger. Florida State at the time had Bobby Bowden. Bobby was different. Bobby was more of a guy who really was dedicated to his faith and family oriented. And Bobby didn't think, any recruit that any kid that Bobby recruited, even if they had a problem in their background, Bobby was, one of these guys that, like, you know what, we'll fix it, we'll make it better, okay, we'll make that person. So Bobby would take chances on players that some others wouldn't, and in most cases it worked out well. In some cases it didn't. Um, and he was always in the shadow of Joe Paterno, who, had the most wins, but Bobby was catching up to him pretty quick. And and so when all of the stuff went down at Penn State, and they stripped um, Paterno over the wins, and Bobby then became the winningest coach in college football. Bobby didn't feel that he had earned it, and it was an interesting dynamic. But Bobby was Bobby was a very nice guy who understood how to coach football, understood how to build, you know, a team. And the battles between Miami and Florida State during the 80s and 90s was emblematic of, you know, the difference between Bobby's philosophy and Jimmy. And then Dennis Erickson comes when Jimmy goes to the Cowboys. And people didn't know what to do with him. I mean, he was a kid just gotten there from the West. He was not somebody that people in the Miami area thought could actually even make it, because, everything Jimmy was, as I said before, that chip on his shoulder, that edge, that kind of like swagger, bravado, was totally different than what Dennis did. And many of the players were concerned about, was this guy really, doing things that we feel are the best things for us, right? And so he Dennis won the team over by proving to them that he might have been a quiet type of guy as opposed to Jimmy, but he did understand how to win. And he understood that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So he tweaked things and he moved stuff around, and he decided, okay, I can put my fingerprints on this team as long as the team understands I get where they want to go. So that was Dennis. Dennis came in, he did that, did a good job. He moved on. Larry Coker came in. Larry had been an assistant to both Jimmy and to Dennis, and so he continued that process. That was all moved forward to the early 2000s. So in the early 2000s, that's when Miami started to, you know, have problems, and they got off. So it's been a while since Miami and Florida State went to Jimbo Fisher. They had that one run for a championship. Jimbo complained about everything that he didn't like about Florida State, and eventually that whole thing blew up, and they went to Mike Norvell to try to rebuild it. So if we look at Clemson and we look at Florida State, and we look at Miami, and we look at Carolina, they all have pluses and minuses. Most of the FSU and the U of M history is just that, history. It's what happened in the past. Dabo Swinney and what was going on with Clemson, that's a problem for them. It's not that they're building in Clemson. And, have they done a magnificent job of keeping, being competition? Not over the last couple of years. So I think when people are looking at this, and certainly the conferences are looking at it, they're looking at what's the trajectory, right? Right now, you would have to say that the University of Miami, with what Mario Cristobal is doing down there, is something that has to be enticing to a Big Ten, because they're a private institution, and they like dealing with private schools. And so I would think that not, I would, if I'm handicapping this, I would think Miami and Carolina are the two teams that the Big Ten are looking at for potential, right? What happens, at Carolina? Now, Carolina has an issue that they've got to deal with, and that's Belichick. What are they going to do with Bill Belichick? Is he going to resurrect the program, or is he going to, is his off field, persona going to get them, make even more problems? They don't want to deal with the drama. That's something they don't want. They have no interest in drama in the Big Ten. So I think over the next few months, and this year, next year, we're going to see how that plays out and whether it hurts them in the potential of conference relocation. I don't know, but we'll certainly find that out. Miami, upside. We know that Mario Cristobal has done a magnificent job down there in Miami of now resurrecting the U. So, growth stock, right? Growth stock for them, Miami. FSU, that's a big question mark. Not, and again, don't get me wrong here. Don't misunderstand. What I'm saying is this: Florida State has got to produce sooner or later. Mike Norvell has got to prove. Yes, they'd had an undefeated season a couple of years ago. Yes, they had a problem with the quarterback and went to the bowl game and nobody decided to play, and they got wiped out by Georgia. The key for Florida State is not where's the brand at right now. Okay, is it on the upswing, or are we still living on Bobby Bowden's laurels back in the day? That's a problem that I think Florida State has got to square before moving out of the ACC to go to either the Southeastern Conference or the Big Ten. We talked about North Carolina. We talked about Clemson. We talked about University of Miami. We talked about the potential of what might or might not happen with what's going on at the University of Arizona State University, Utah. What's happening out there. So those are some of the places to keep an eye on. What happens to the ACC? I don't think the ACC craters. I just don't think that happens. Can they lose, four big brands and still survive? I believe they can. I do. I believe they can. Do I think that the Big 12 will try to add some? I do. I think there will be an attempt there. My personal theory of the case on the Big 12 is they onboarded 8 teams last time. And did it help them? Yes, of course it helped them. However, if it's really up to Brett Yormark, he's a very bright man, but no doubt Brett is up there. I mean, he totally understands what's going on. The thing is he going to? Because he hasn't said specifically he's taking them out to open market, but if he if he chooses not to take them to open market and he chooses to sit down with ESPN and Fox, there's going to be a conversation about the fact that, are we going to get the opportunity to really get the best out of this conference? And I think that the value is there, but is it the value that Brett wants versus what ESPN and Fox is going to say? Because ESPN and Fox are going to say, look, we threw you a lifeline last time. You got the money that we felt was you're worthy of. You have a number in your head, and we have a number in our head. I don't think it's the same number. If he doesn't think Brett doesn't think they can get what he feels they're worth, and he takes them to the open market, then you've taken Fox and ESPN not necessarily off the board, but you haven't helped yourself in that, because Fox and ESPN are going to go, okay, wait a minute. We have an exclusive window to negotiate with you, and you have chosen not to, you know, return to our thing under the guise of the contract we want. So now ESPN and Fox will be in the mix with perhaps TNT, I would think, maybe, perhaps some streaming services. Does that mean Fox and ESPN give up on the Big 12? No, it doesn't. What it does mean is that they're less likely, in almost, I'm not going to say not inclined at all, but they're less likely in any way to want to be involved with you in a long-term deal. So the long-term deal is just not gonna be that way, and so we'll have to see how that all works out. Um, it's going to be very fascinating. That's for absolutely certain, and we're going to be here to talk about it from now until the end of the season. Hope everybody has an opportunity to be involved with us and come around and enjoy it, and we'll be with you. So anyway, have a wonderful day, everybody. You know where to get me on X at JW Media DC, and you can leave some comments here if you like, and we'll answer those questions for you. All right, everybody, have a wonderful day, and don't forget to see Sean and the gang doing their stuff very, very soon throughout the day here on Capital Sports. Take care, everybody.